No, don't fight. Jeez. Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me on another one of our Halloween videos. Today I am bringing you a legend that, while researching it, scared the crap out of me. I closed all my blinds, locked all my doors and windows, and it took me probably an hour and a half to get to sleep that night. Now, I'm just going to say right now, I continuously watch true crime, horror movies, read scary books, like horror novels, and not a lot can scare me anymore, but this definitely did. Maybe you have to be in the zone and researching it and reading and listening to countless stories and whatnot, but it gets to you. So today we are going to be talking about the Black-Eyed Children. Now, lots of people have heard about them. Not a lot of people have looked into the stories or into the claims that have been made about people seeing them, and actually it's a relatively new phenomenon, but I'll get to that later. Let's just start with the myth or the legend, or what is supposedly supposed to happen when you encounter the Black-Eyed Children. So the legend states that two young children around the ages of maybe 8 to 12 years old, but I've actually seen as old as like teenagers, will knock on your door when you're home alone late at night. There's also been reportings of them approaching vehicles late at night, schools, being in alleyways or wooded areas. They will ask incessantly to come in to your home or to go home with you to call their parents. If you say no, they continue knocking or trying to convince you to let them in. If you say no or even ask a question like, where are your parents? Why are you out late at night? What happened? Was there an accident? They don't ever answer that. They don't respond to that at all. They simply continue asking to come inside or trying to convince you to let them inside, which is super creepy. Generally, they avoid looking you in the eye, looking up at you, or letting you see their eyes initially. And interestingly enough, it's commonly reported that they're wearing either outdated clothing or have outdated hairstyles or a general look, and they're almost never dressed for the weather, meaning it'll usually be storming or snowy outside, just inclement weather, and they'll be wearing like a dress and maybe, or like shorts and sandals or something, and never a coat, nothing like that. So probably because then you're more likely to let them into your house if they look like they're cold or they could become sick from standing outdoors. While some of the stories change in how they're approached, how the people are approached by the children or the circumstances surrounding it, it's almost always later at night, in the evening, and when they're alone, and during not so great weather. The general consensus for what one experiences emotionally when they encounter the Black-Eyed Children is a feeling of uneasiness, sensations of terror or dread, and interestingly, people also report that they seem to have no control over their own body anymore or their willpower, and they're almost actually always going to let the kids in through the door, through wherever, without realizing that they're doing it. Does that make sense? Like when they ask to come in, you'll be confused and feeling terrified, and yet your arm is going to open the door for them when you're not intending to do so. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is actually a fairly new phenomenon in comparison to most like folklore and tales and legends like this. The first reporting of it was actually in 1998 by a blogger by the name of Brian Bethel in Abilene, Texas. Brian actually didn't report the experience until 2 years after it had happened, so it occurred in approximately 1996. In Bethel's report, he was in a parking lot of a movie theater when two boys around the ages of 9 to 12 years old in hoods approached his vehicle. Immediately, Bethel said he was irrationally afraid of these two children. He cracked his window and asked if they were all right. They stated they needed a ride home to get money for a movie. However, Bethel knew that the final movie of that night had already started almost an hour ago. Bethel stated that he tried to calm himself and just take a moment and rationally try to handle this situation. Finally, the boys lifted their heads slightly from under their hoods and Bethel saw both had pitch black eyes. Now reaching a point of unbridled terror, he rolled up the window immediately, threw his car into reverse, and sped out of the parking lot. Looking back in his rearview mirror, the boys were nowhere to be seen. And it's been pretty much since that time that stories of black-eyed children have started to ramp up in frequency, or people coming forward with stories of them. Now, I did write down a few stories that I wanted to share with you simply because they're the ones that freak me out the most. I think I have 3. Yeah, I have 3. One of them's super long, but if you see me looking down a lot, it's because I'm reading my script here. So the first story I have is from March 2008. A 12-year-old was sitting outside of a hair salon while their mother was getting a haircut inside. They noticed a boy pacing on the sidewalk, and a short time later, this boy walked up to the truck and stared into it with pitch black eyes. The black-eyed boy said, "You must let me in." The 12-year-old promptly locked the doors and sank down into the foot area of the truck. Minutes later, the black-eyed boy was gone. However, their mother stated later that a black-eyed boy had come into the salon and asked for the keys to her car, to which she obviously said no. How freaky is that? For you to not even really mention it to your mom and then her to basically corroborate your story by something equally as creepy. Yep, that's weird. The second story I have for you here is actually the only account I saw of someone letting the kids into their house, which did not end well. This is a summary of the story, but I did put the link down in the description for you to read it and check it out yourself, or maybe it's elsewhere that you can find and there's more detail in it. I just wanted to summarize it. A woman and her husband were living in a rural part of Vermont, one that was very close-knit and where you rarely had to lock your doors. I don't like it when people say that. I don't know if it's because I'm jaded as fuck or if living in a capital city ruined me, but I will always lock my door and make sure my windows are closed, at least on the main floor, because you just never know. You never know. Anyway, continuing. In this story, the woman states that in the middle of the night, in a snowstorm, she heard a loud bang on the door in the middle of the night. Thinking this may have been someone in need of help, she rushed to the door with her husband. Standing at their front door were 2 children, a boy and a girl about the age of 8. Immediately, she noted something strange, because normally she would have invited them in without hesitation, but something about these kids was, quote, unnerving. They wouldn't look them in the eyes and instead stared at their feet. They were not dressed for the cold, no jackets, and everything from their hair to their clothing would suggest that they came from another time completely. The husband then asked if everything was okay. Was there an accident? To which the children replied, "Can we come in?" The couple then asked where their parents were, and the kids replied, "They'll be here soon." Nope. Against her better judgment, she reasoned that it was the middle of the night and snowing. She had to bring the kids inside. Everyone sits down in the living room, and her husband stays with the children while she goes to make hot cocoa in the kitchen. The wife notes that one of her 4 cats was behaving strangely when they were usually very friendly with strangers. The rest of the cats, however, were nowhere to be found. The wife returned to the living room to find her husband holding his head in his hands. She asked what was wrong. He brushed it off and saying that he was fine, just very dizzy suddenly, but he was all right. As she hands the children the cocoa, she finally sees their eyes for the first time. Instant terror flashes through her, and quickly the children ask if they can use the bathroom. She quickly shows them the way to the washroom, and as the kids are gone, she and her husband begin discussing who the kids could belong to. Suddenly, her husband's nose starts to bleed. She couldn't quite explain it, but she knew that this had something to do with those kids. She quickly runs to get her husband a tissue as the power goes out. Trying to feel her way back to her husband, she walks through the hall to see the children standing there, just staring at her. After what feels like an eternity, one of them says, "Our parents are here," and they simply walk out the front door together, leaving it wide open. The husband scrambles to close and lock the door before they both look out the window and see 2 tall male figures wearing black standing beside an idling car at the end of their driveway. These men simply stare at the couple, who had attempted to wave at them and get their attention, before driving off with the children. About half an hour later, the power came back on. After this encounter, nothing was the same. 3 of their 4 cats went missing, and the one that was in the room with the children was found dead in a pool of its own blood. The vet had concluded that it had suffered some sort of a hemorrhage. As well, the nosebleeds became a frequent occurrence, suddenly for the husband, who had never suffered from this condition previously. He finally went to the doctor and was diagnosed with a severe and aggressive form of skin cancer that was mostly linked to the abuse of tanning beds, something he had never used in his life. The wife also suffers from nosebleeds, dizziness, and other ailments that she wouldn't get into any detail about. Now, this last one is the one that scared me the most because I have lived in apartments my whole life, and I always kind of felt a little safer if I was above ground level, thinking, hey, nobody can get into my house easily. I guess unless there's a fire, but even then you have like those drop-down ladders that you can buy from hardware stores. Anyway, this one was the scariest for me because how the fuck? That's all I could think when reading this one. Alright, again, I'm summarizing it, but here we go. A woman in her early 20s lived alone and was walking into her apartment complex when she heard some kids laughing and then whispering as she walked up to her suite. It was a bit late for kids to be up, and this seemed strange, but she continued upstairs to her apartment on the 3rd floor. She lets herself in and walks over to her balcony to open the door and let some air into the house. As she pulls back the blinds, lo and behold, there are 2 kids staring back on a 3rd floor balcony. Screaming and backing away, the eldest of the 2 touches the glass and says, "Hey miss, can you let us in?" She simply stared in disbelief and asks, "How did you get on my balcony?" She again approaches the door, and the eldest looks a bit more excited as if she might let them in, and again says, "Can you let us in?" Suddenly, the woman realizes that she's unlocked and is beginning to open the door without intending to. She looks up, realizing what she's doing, and sees the entirely black eyes of the 2 kids staring back at her. Out of fear, she regains her senses, quickly locks the door, and calls the police. The entire time she was on the phone with the police, the eldest boy is pleading to be let in. When the police arrived, they walked straight up to the balcony and saw 2 children running away from the building, which is absolutely terrifying. So not only did this young woman see these 2 kids, she interacted with them, and then when the police showed up, they saw 2 kids running from the building. So it wasn't just a figment of her imagination. It wasn't just, an apparition or something. They saw them too. And the police did state they must have had help getting up to the 3rd floor balcony. And, she's like, well, what? There's no ladder. There's nothing. Like, it would have been a pretty big undertaking to climb up 3 floors without any equipment or anything being seen. Anyway, that one freaked me out the most. And that's when I could no longer have my patio door open. Ooh. I do have some theories behind the black-eyed children. Firstly, some people's experiences are thought to be like false memories. Basically, you look into something so much, or you read about it so much, or you kind of, soak in a lot of it that you're more likely to be attentive to it happening or creating it in your mind, basically. It's possible that while immersing yourself into subject matter, you essentially prime yourself for being influenced by it, which makes sense. I was obviously more sensitive after researching it and looking into the details. I didn't see anything, but you could mistake it. So basically, the first theory that people, kind of come around to is that you're imagining it, essentially. False memories, false experiences, you got carried away with your imagination. Another theory is that it's a hoax, and that after people reading about it from the initial reporting by Brian, and stories after that teenagers have gotten scleral contacts. I don't know if you know what those are, but they're basically contacts that cover even the white parts of your eyes, black it out. So it is possible that some nasty people have just decided to prank someone, especially with the rise of internet claims. It's definitely possible that you're being pranked. Another that has some more history to it is an Iroquois legend of something called Otkon. Otkon. O-T-K-O-N. They believed that a dark force called the Otkon could overtake children or mate with a human female to produce black-eyed and chalk-skinned children. These children were killed soon after being born, and their bodies burned to ensure they couldn't be resurrected. Children wandering alone could be possessed by Otkon and return with black eyes, pale skin, and repeat the same things over and over again, such as the "Can we come in? Can we come in?" Ultimately, it was believed that the Otkon were looking to infect the whole tribe and possess the whole tribe. Another theory is that they are conduits for demons to spread mischief, and that's pretty self-explanatory. I'm actually kind of curious if anyone's touched a black-eyed kid or come into contact at all with them. Like, are they tangible? Are they real? Or are they maybe apparitions and are actually just demons taking the form of a child? And the last theory is aliens. Aliens. It has been theorized that the black-eyed children are actually aliens, or more specifically, the Greys. And regarding that Vermont encounter and the men that took the children away afterwards, some have actually theorized that those men were potentially men in black. However, I'm not going to get too deep on the alien theory. If you want to check it out for yourself, you are more than welcome. The links will all be down in the description. I did watch tons of videos on black-eyed children, listened to some podcasts about them, and there's actually a book by David Weatherly titled The Black-Eyed Children that goes into all sorts of encounters and theories if you're interested in learning more. It's definitely now on my to-read list. I just didn't have time to read it before posting and editing this video. So I'm curious to know, what do you think of the black-eyed children? Do you think they are a real phenomenon? Have you had an experience yourself? Do you know someone who's had an experience? Let me know down in the comments. And that is it for me today, guys. So thank you for joining me on this Halloween video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.